Awesome. Josh, way to go. We really wanted to put in jump around during that scene where we were dancing on the meadow, but copyright infringement really got us there. So beautiful. We've got 2 questions in the chat that we are going to start with. If you have any additional questions that come up as we start chatting, please put them in there. Otherwise, we will head into the live discussion afterwards. So Josh, first question is, how long do we need to leave that plastic down?
So I think ideally you would want to keep that plastic down for the majority of the season. So if you were to say like lay it down in May sometime or April, you want to keep it probably up until the end of September or so. But I think if you happen to be kind of late to the game, a minimum of 3 months I think would be adequate to smother a site where it would allow weed seeds to germinate and die, where you'll have less competition with your native seeds.
Cool. So another question coming in from Jonathan. If we did not smother the plot, can we still plant native seeds now? If so, how should we prep the ground? Instead of straw, can you use grass clippings or leaves that have been mowed over?
Okay, that's all one question, correct?
I'm going to put it into the chat so you can read it. It got sent to me privately.
Okay.
So throw that in there. Jonathan, I hope you don't mind that I throw this into everybody. It was a really good question. So you can read it there, Josh.
Sure. So I'm kind of hesitant. I wouldn't maybe, you could try maybe a small section to see how it does, but I wouldn't really recommend planting native seeds right now if you haven't treated the site. Can I ask you what the site is? Is it just empty ground or empty space, or is it like sod or? Oh, I think the audio. I can't hear you. Yeah, your audio is really, I can't make out your audio. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Jonathan, in the meantime, would it be okay if you just type? I can't make out your audio. I can't hear it. Would it be okay if you just type your answer in the chat to me if the site is empty or if it's covered already? I'm just having a hard time with your audio. Thanks. Okay. I'm going to go to the next question then.
Yep. So next question is from Christy. How do we know which seeds need the cold weather to germinate?
How do we know which seeds need the cold weather to germinate? So what I've always known is wildflowers. So all of your blooming, your flowers, your wildflowers, they need the cold, dormant winter, the cold to break dormancy, and that's how they will germinate in the spring. And then grasses like dropseed, blue stem, Sidotes grama, big blue stem, they all need warm season to germinate. So which would be in the springtime. So as general rule of thumb, the cold weather is for wildflowers. It looks like almond. Can you please go over the ratio of sand to seeds again? So for me, it's per 1,000 square feet of seeds is 2 bushels or 2 cubic feet. There's more detailed information on Prairie Nursery's website too. They kind of help me out with how to sow this meadow and go step by step. And I kind of wanted to break it down for everyone else, kind of in a video recording as I did, to just kind of like show how it's done. I've actually never done this before, so this is my first time as well, and I've learned a lot. So I'm hoping sharing this with you all, you'll kind of get a taste of it and maybe want to try it in your own space. Yeah.
Cool. So we've got, did Jonathan get you those questions, Josh? Or the answers?
I think he's still getting there. I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay. So we've got a question from Anne. I planted prairie seeds this spring, but it was a little late in the season to break the germination cycle for some species. Will those seeds likely germinate this next spring, or do I need to reseed this fall? She means break dormancy, not germination cycle.
Right, yeah, you will not have to reseed. Some of these seeds actually take a couple of years to germinate. So that's why they say it's really important to be patient with your prairie sowing from seed, because like I said, some seeds will take a while to germinate. I know one example is a baptisia. If those are in the seed mix, those will generally pop up within the 3rd year in your space. And there might be some seeds that you may not even see a lot of growth, like I said, above ground, but there could be a lot of rooting going on underneath the ground that you're not aware of. So you definitely don't need to reseed. I think what you did last year was perfect. You might surprise yourself this coming spring to see what actually comes up this next spring.
Well, so yeah, Jonathan says his site is a mix of sod, creeping Charlie, and violets.
Sure. Okay. So this is a really good question. So the site, let's say if you wanted to sow seeds in the site, if it is sod, you could use a sod cutter to expose that site, and you could lay the seeds down. Since that sod was covering the ground all of these years, I think you'd be safe to sow those. If the space is just creeping Charlie, I would probably suggest, or you said it's a mix of sod, creeping Charlie, and violets. Honestly, to be safe with creeping Charlie, that can be quite aggressive. I wouldn't take the chance of sowing it now. I would honestly smother it and just get it done and over with. You could even lay it down this winter, so you don't have to worry about it in the spring. But if you don't want to lay it down this winter, I would just lay it down as early as you can in the springtime. You also could take a chance of using the sod cutter, but if it was just pure sod, I wouldn't be so worried. But the fact that there's creeping Charlie mixed in, I don't know if that might smother your seedlings, because you just want to make sure that they're exposed to light. And if we have this low growing ground cover, that's going to obviously deprive these little seedlings of light, which, I don't think they're going to make it. So I hope that helped out a little bit.
Yeah. And then Josh, can Jonathan use grass clippings and leaves to cover the site, like how we're using straw?
It's recommended that you use straw, and the sterile straw. Some of these leaves could potentially have weed seeds mixed in with them. Let's say, there's could be seeds floating anywhere, like where you pick up these leaves. They say the best method of covering them up is with a sterile straw.
have a question.
Go for it.
Okay, Josh, after you seed in the fall, early spring, would it be advisable to put a light fertilizer on the new seedlings, like a monorganite or something very, very low in nitrogen, or just not do that at all?
No, it's not recommended to do anything like that. I think, with the seed sowing, I think the concept of it is it's supposed to be really low maintenance. The only type of maintenance that you would do on it is just for the first couple of years, just keeping it cut so you can inhibit weeds from setting in. But there's no suggestion of, fertilizing these seeds or anything. It won't do any good because they're not even like germinated quite yet, if that makes sense. So it's not going to do any good for them.
Okay.
Also, a lot of the time, let's say you're into your second season with these and they have germinated and they're small plants at this point. A lot of the material that you left behind to cut over the years should stay in place, and in a way that acts as like a compost and a fertilizer in itself. I know when you cut it the first year, you're supposed to leave a lot of stuff in place. Not too much where it's going to smother the plants, but they talk about how you should leave it in place because it actually acts as an insulator over winter too.
How short of a cut? How short of a cut?
No, you don't have to fertilize or anything. Everything takes care of itself. And if the site is the soil that you have, it has a lot of nutrition in it, you're not going to worry about that. And all these seeds are native. So, they're used to, clay soils, really, some of them are really used to really, I want to call poor soils. So they're used to it.
So how short of a cut do you cut it the first year? You cut it like 2 inches, 3 inches high?
Anything get higher than a foot.
Higher than a foot.
Nothing should be higher than a foot.
Oh, okay. All right.
Cool. So, Josh, Margaret has a question. I would like to encourage my milkweed seeds to germinate in my existing gardens. What should I do to encourage this?
Honestly, I don't have a really good answer for this. We've had milkweed all over our garden that I've just been kind of thinning out, it gets a little aggressive. You could harvest these milkweed seeds before they fly off into space, and you could directly sow them into your ground in a specific area and just kind of monitor and keep track of that area, to just know where they are and keep an eye out for them. I say that would probably be your best bet. I don't really have a true answer for this. I say just make sure that you are physically holding the seeds and you put them in the site that you want, so then you know that this is where they are, and then you can kind of monitor them to see how they're doing. They shouldn't be too hard to grow. Is it like a specific type of milkweed, or is it isn't this like a butterfly milkweed, or is it like the other milkweed that I forgot the common name of it. Is it Mexican milkweed? I don't know. I'm blanking on that one right now. Margaret, if you feel comfortable, you can answer that if it's just like a general milkweed, or if it's like a butterfly milkweed or swamp milkweed, or yeah. So that'll probably be the best bet, just collecting the seeds and directly sowing them yourself.
Yeah, hi, this is Peggy. Well, I have both, and my neighbor has a beautiful prairie garden with the prairie milkweed, the regular monarch butterfly wonderful milkweed, and I can't get it going in my garden for some reason. And I have the more refined versions that I've bought as plants, and they grow okay, but I can't get the seeds to start. And I've done this for a few years, and I do put them in a specific place.
Interesting.
And maybe they don't get enough, maybe they get outcompeted by other things growing too fast.
That might be the case. As I said, like some seeds, like, you know, a lot of these seeds, when we sow them, they're in a clean slate. So everyone's kind of getting the same amount of light. And then over time, plants will outcompete other plants, and then they'll just kind of be dominant. That's kind of the beauty of these seed mixes, because then you won't have to really worry about filling the space with other plants. You know, plants will just kind of find themselves where they feel best. I guess if you want to encourage milkweed, maybe take some cuttings, like rootings of milkweed, and planting them in your space, or maybe thin out your space a little bit, so they're not competing as much with the fully grown plants. If you think about it too, there's a lot of the time, like there's a lot going on underneath the ground too. I mean, you have prairie plants, you know, some roots are like going directly into the ground, some are creeping across the ground. That's the beauty of a prairie, you know, and seedlings just covering the space. That's why we don't have a lot of weeds in our prairies, because we have all these root systems that are, you know, going horizontal, vertical, you know, running within those vertical and horizontal roots. So I think that might be the case. It might be just a little too competitive for these little fresh seeds. So that's a really good thought.
Cool. We got a question from Christy. If we start the smothering process now, when would you suggest pulling up in the spring? Would you till the soil after smothering and before seeding?
Okay, let me think about this one. I want to give you, so if we were to start smothering it now, I wouldn't pull it up too early in the spring, because a lot of things haven't gotten the chance to germinate yet. And in the spring, temperatures are fairly cool, and a lot of weed seeds need that warmth to germinate. So I feel like if you were to smother it now, that is fine, but I wouldn't suggest pulling it up in the spring, because I don't think that would be enough time for things to germinate, the weed seeds to germinate. And if you till the soil after smothering, you don't want to go too deep, because there are still weed seeds. There will always be weed seeds in your soil forever. It's just the way it is. So you don't want to till up the soil too much where you're exposing more weed seeds. And I don't know if I covered this in the video as well, but when we exposed our site after pulling up the plastic, Elin and I raked the site clean, which was also kind of, I guess, roughing up the first inch of soil. So roughing up that soil allowed seeds to kind of land in various spaces in the soil, within the soil. Like I said, if you're tilling the soil, I would just use like a spring rake and just rake up like the first inch of soil, just so the seeds can be embedded into that soil, and then you would step on them in place, if that makes sense. So yeah, instead of tilling, I would just rake it. You just have to get them embedded a little bit.
Beautiful. Any other questions that folks want to chime in with, either on the chat or in person?
So I want to make a really quick comment. So when I was discussing how to maintain your meadow or your prairie after sowing, I gave the example when I was in the prairie. So that site was really interesting, because we planted like hundreds of plugs of native plants in there last year, actually maybe 2 years ago. And we decided to sprinkle in this prairie mix in between them this spring. And we actually did not treat the soil at all. We didn't have any plastic down or anything, because we didn't want to kill the existing prairie plants that established themselves in there already. We were very lucky to have that site. The only type of weeds that were in that site were just annual weeds that weren't aggressive. We were lucky not to have any type of prairie or perennial weeds in there. So I want to say like this project is actually looking pretty good. After sowing the seeds in the spring, we actually have a lot of coneflower and rattlesnake master and sunflower heliopsis seeds. Wow, little I can't talk right now. Wow. Seedlings, I guess you want to say miniature plants. I can't think of a specific word. Growing right now over the course of the year, and they're like only a couple inches tall, but I know that the roots are like taken off underneath the ground. So what I want to say is it's not, it's not the end of the world if you don't smother it before, but I think just making sure that the site doesn't have any really aggressive perennial weeds in it beforehand is really important to think as well. Like I said, like this meadow, we started from scratch and we did everything by the book by smothering it for the course of the season. But this prairie, we just kind of did an experiment on. We're like, we're not going to smother it. There's plants in here already. We're just going to see what happens. And so far, so good. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat right now.
All right. Think it's safe to wrap up, Josh?
I think so.
All right.
Thanks
Cool.
everyone for joining us tonight.
Yep. And same time next week, 6:30, we'll talk about making leaf mulch. We've got 4 different ways to make leaf mulch. We'll talk a bit about the pros and cons. So get those questions ready, get excited, and be expecting an email from us in the next week with the recording from these first 2 sessions and with a link to our feedback survey.
Cool. Thanks, Elin.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.